morning. I'm Rafael Clemente. I'm the Executive Director of the Downtown Development Authority. First off, thanks to Dennis Grady and the Chamber for, on short notice, allowing us to host this meeting here. To hear from Joe Minicozzi with Urban3. We're going to take you on a deep dive looking at productivity of property, impact fees. I'll let him explain really what he does. It's pretty amazing and it's very valuable to what we all do. But I want to tell you a little bit about why we did this and why we chose to work with Joe, and not just the DDA, but the DDA and the city together. Looking at downtown development, looking at urban infill and the patterns that we're seeing with suburban development and other things, there's been many conversations about how we can use and allocate resources better, how we can do better with our tax base and the resource that we have. And that conversation has been had in many different ways and in many different forums. But no one ever really got to zeroing in on or quantifying what we have and how we're managing it and using it. What are the impacts of our decisions? So what Joe has been able to do, and I'm sure it took some time to zero in on this kind of analysis, is pull in data, property values, sales tax revenues, fee generation, and run it through a series of models and really do an apples to apples comparison of productivity of property, policies, et cetera. And what this has done for the DDA and the city is give us a baseline analysis of what we've got, what our asset is, and then help us then go and form policies that are going to allow us to do better with it. You know, at the DDA, I can speak at least for us, we always want to be able to be sure that we're measuring well what we're doing and quantifying that expenditure of public money. But there's so many parts and there's so many pieces to it. This has enabled us to really get a finger on the pulse of what we've got to work with, and also given us the baseline that we can then go and measure year over year. Now that we've got the model built, we can use it to learn more over time. So with that, I'm going to introduce Joe Minicozzi. Many of you know him. I'll let him tell his own story.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm mic'd
you're
up.
mic'd. And
I'm live.
if you will use this, it's not amplification, it's so we can capture this on video, and we would love a robust Q&A afterwards.
I know many of you. My name is Joe Minicozzi. I'm the principal of a firm called Urban3 based out of Asheville, North Carolina. Urban3 is, I guess, an economics modeling firm. I still have a hard time saying what it is or what we do. It's kind of a way of visualizing economic data of cities. It's a spin-off of a real estate development company in downtown Asheville called Public Interest Projects. It's work that we were doing in Asheville that have kind of taken off around the country, but I'll get through that too. Before Asheville, I actually was the principal urban designer for the form-based code for downtown, the downtown master plan that was put in place in, 1995? And I worked with Tim, Anthea, and Dana at the city. So some of you know me from that. So it's fun to come back here. It's interesting to see the changes that have happened. It's also frustrating to see some of the changes that haven't happened. It's kind of hard. It's like visiting family members in a way. And my challenge is to try to look at this place with a new lens and see the economic data. To put things in perspective, this is what West Palm Beach looked like when I first got here. City Place didn't exist. Mr. Sanders, you were working on that project. This whole area was just wiped out. Just the attitude of what we had to do inside West Palm Beach was completely different then. To put it in perspective, this is straight out of the master plan. This is just a drawing of what buildings were left standing in 1996. So it was a different place, to put it lightly. The whole time I think of cities, and back then when I think of cities, I always think of cities as places in time. West Palm Beach was growing up. It's still an adolescent. It still has a way to go. And I think of cities the same way I think of people. So if you want to see me and how I grew up, this is me when I was 3 months old, when I had hair. And this is what I'm going to become. So my life is on the trajectory of being Papa, right? Or more importantly, I'm looking at this guy, my dad. So I have 2 genetic issues in my family. I'm genetically Italian, and I also have a genetic predisposition to heart disease. So I know I'm going to have heart issues. I can't get around that. So I have to make conscious choices to avoid those things. So my question, I'm putting my lesson up front for all of y'all. For West Palm Beach, sorry, I've got a bit of a cold. For West Palm Beach, who's your father? Who's your grandfather? Are you looking to Broward and Dade County and trying to avoid some of their pitfalls? Are you following the same policies that put them in the same heart attack? These are questions you all should wrestle with. What makes you different in your growth pattern from them, and how can you cultivate a different community than what they have? So that's the lens I want you to see all of this data. So Asheville, this is where I live. Who's been to Asheville? A lot of you? Asheville's a beautiful place. It's up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We're known for our bluegrass music. We're known for our beer. We've got 20 breweries in town. Like any typical little mountain town, we have men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire. Typical little place. It wasn't always great. It wasn't always crawling with men in nun suits. This is what Asheville looked like in the 90s. It was bombed out and left fallow. And this is now a hotel. You could blow a cannon off and not hit anybody on the street. The community had just walked away from the downtown. That wasn't a place that they wanted. And it was because of debts that they took on in 1920 that kept that place locked in time. And you see all of these boarded up buildings just sitting here. This wasn't an urban place. They had plenty of land to spill out into. They weren't going to go back into that city. And like a Greek choir, anytime somebody's tried to do downtown, they would hear from the community leaders, that'll never work here, don't even try. We're not urban people. If you want that, go to some big city, don't do that here, right? Some of you heard this before? Any of the communities you've worked in? There's always the detractors that don't understand what cities are. Now again, if we look at them as places in time, as hairless apes, we've been building cities for 10,000 years. It's what we do. There's an economic model that we've created. So this is Julian Price. Julian founded this is a for-profit real estate development company called Public Interest Projects. Julian inherited a lot of money, and he took $15 million out of his own pocket and put it into a real estate development company. It's a for-profit real estate development company. 75% of the money goes into the sticks and bricks. These are the buildings that we rehab. Another 25% we put into businesses. So we go out and find entrepreneurs and seed them with capital. Entrepreneurs that we know that are going to be successful, like the first vegetarian restaurant. They went to the bank. The banks took one look at their menu, and they said, look, where's the pork? What's this vegetarian stuff? And this is a pork state. You can't do a restaurant without meat. And so we went ahead and bankrolled them. What's interesting, though, is our time is the direct opposite. We spend 75% of our time with the entrepreneurs and 25% with the buildings. The buildings don't do crazy things once you get them going. They're pretty much work themselves. It's a very interesting model, and it's all about seeding a downtown residential population. So this is one of our buildings before and after. These are 400 to 600 square foot unit apartments. We were told this would never work. Now, because we were operating off 100% equity, we could do whatever we wanted. So we asked a different question. Who would live in a 400 to 600 square foot apartment? One person, two people. Let me change the question. Let me change the question. Who in this room has lived in a 400 to 600 square foot apartment? Now that's how we deal with our real estate. We understand that our city is a complexity of people, and that we know that there's at least 28 people that are either recently divorced, new to town, recently graduated. They're going to take that thing. It's in a development world. This is called a home run. It's been 99% leased up ever since. The other thing about Julian that was fairly interesting is that he was also a pretty aggressive community activist. He had his own newspaper. This is what Asheville looked like at the time. It was just boarded up buildings. This is an article that he had. He was fighting billboards. And I love this quote from Arthur Frommer that he uses. Among cities with no particular recreation appeal, those that have preserved their past continue to enjoy tourism. Those that haven't receive no tourism at all. Tourism simply doesn't go to a city that's lost its soul. Those are pretty heavy words. Arthur Frommer, he quoted. 15 years after Julian published this, Frommer's magazine would list this as the number 5 place in the country to visit. Just this year, we got listed number 1. There are 5 million tourists a year that come through Asheville. That's really important for us. So this is all great, Joe. That's a good touchy-feely story. But what about the data of what's going on here? I love this quote from Michael Bloomberg. So for us, looking at the city is a cash flow model. The city is a corporation. It's a boundary of real estate. We've got $15 million in our portfolio. My city is worth $12.8 billion as a real estate development project. That's its taxable value. So the city is just a finite boundary of land that has to be managed. It has to cash flow. It has to operate financially. And there's a of financial flow that's going through that. So if you just go to Oxford American Dictionary and look up the term incorporate, this is what it says. Constitute a company, a city, or other organization is a legal corporation. City's got a charter. It's got a board of directors. You elect the board of directors for the city. So my city is worth 4 times the Donald, if you want to look at it at a portfolio basis. Does my city think of itself that way? Do they make a financial decision the way that the Donald would? Does your city do this? These are ways that you have to kind of talk about this stuff. Incidentally, I was talking with Bob about this earlier. That little point I learned here in West Palm Beach from the city commission here. So this is what was going on in Asheville. We didn't get a new building in downtown until about 2008. These first 2 steps were just by filling those existing buildings that were there. Our downtown went from $100 million of value to $500 million of value just by fixing what was there. So think about what happened from a tax repercussion. We grew our tax basis 4 times over in that same period on the same objects. So that got me thinking about land. I mean, land and buildings are essentially crops. You're growing a really big farm. You're growing an herb called buildings, right? So this is one of our buildings here. The community got mad at us mad at the city because the city did a streetscape project, and we were accused of being subsidized by having this streetscape project. Now, regardless of the fact the entire world could walk on this sidewalk, let's go ahead and own it. Thank you, city, for dumping a garbage can, a bike rack, 2 benches, and a street tree in front of our building. We took it and made retail, office, and residential, taking the taxable value from $300,000 to $11 million of taxable basis. That's a 3,500% tax hit that we took to fix that building. That's one way of looking at it. But the way that we see it is our community can now afford 3,500% more stuff, right? Y'all get that? Anybody in the room have a 401k plan that grows by 3,500%? I mean, think about this. Our sharehold in the community is now blown up its net worth. This is the way that we see rehab and fixing buildings. People say to me, they're like, well, Joe, that's fine. That's 11 million bucks. You know, there's this Walmart over here. It's $20 million. Walmart's kicking off $221,000 in property taxes. That's quite impressive, right? So, all right, well, this is my house. Those are my dogs. My dogs think they're lions. We pay $2,000 in taxes. We're on 1/10 of an acre. If a 1-acre cookie cutter fell from space and hit my neighborhood, it'd grab 10 houses, right? Each paying $2,000 or $20,000 an acre. If you take that same 1-acre cookie cutter and throw it on top of the Walmart and divide its tax bill by the 34 acres it's sitting on, this is what it produces. Now, if you had 1 acre of our building, this is what it produces. So if you're an elected official and you want to have a cash flow, what kind of cash flow is going to be giving you the best bang for your buck? You only have a certain amount of acres, particularly for a county. Palm Beach County can't go off and annex Broward County. It's not going to happen. You are set with these acres that you have. Did y'all follow this? I was in Denver, and I wanted to make it really easy for people in Denver, and I was like, look, y'all, you only had 1 acre of land in Denver to grow something. What are you going to grow? And they got the joke. This works in Asheville, too, by the way. But so you're probably saying, well, Joe, that's not fair. There's retail taxes. Let's go ahead and remove me because I don't sell anything. And again, we tend to focus on the larger number, that $77 million of retail sales, which is very impressive. Now, the problem is that the city gets a portion of that. So 8 cents on the sales tax dollar. Our city's getting about 27% of that 8 cents. You guys get a little less. But running those numbers, you get an impressive $47,000 an acre in retail taxes, or a total tax take of $51,000 an acre. That's total. This is just the property taxes we're spinning off. You add our retail taxes, you're cooking with gas, jobs per acre. How do y'all want to look at it? Incidentally, we'll have this all as a PDF if you want it. So we even have residential per acre that they don't have. So when you put the numbers out there and you just be agnostic about the numbers and normalize things on what you can control, which is land, it'll tell you a different story about the city. So what I'm doing here is just using the simple rules of arithmetic. I'm just using math in the least common denominator to look at put a new lens on cities. Now that's just the city perspective. As we all know, the city sits on top of this other corporation called the county. Y'all are shareholders in the county as well, right? So one of the things that we see is that the city resident, on average, pays more county taxes per acre to the county than somebody out in the unincorporated county area. We like to pick on the Biltmore estate, and they're America's largest house needs the biggest tax break apparently. But this is the mall here, at about $8,000 an acre of county tax production versus $1,700. So you see why you may be more interested in doing commercial development, is that it produces a higher revenue than residential. Now, let's not stop there. Let's bring our building into it. So our building is producing about $250,000 an acre in county taxes to the county. Here's the mall. So what we find is what's good for downtown is great for the city, but it's incredible for the county from a taxable basis. So I just want to step back. I don't have a finance degree. I'm not a CPA. I'm using really simple math to explain how this stuff works. It's breaking it down and making it easy. So we do this with other forms of economics, right? When we talk about cars, we don't talk about cars on a miles per tank basis, do we? Right? If we did, we'd all be driving Ford F-150s at 650 miles per tank. We all realize how silly that is because we all know that tanks are different sizes. And the efficiency is how far you can get on that gallon of gas. You buy the gas by the gallon, that's how you measure things, right? So when I say miles per gallon, the numbers change. And we should all be driving 1955 BMW Asettas at 70 miles per gallon. I'm being cute about this, but I'm trying to show you we use this form of efficiency already as in our common parlance of efficiency. So we've done this all across the country, even up in Canada. Every city that we pile into this, we see the same averaging of numbers. And this is how it works out. For every dollar, this is over 36 different cities, and yours turns out the same way. For every dollar of county taxes somebody in the county is paying to the county in taxes per acre, somebody in the city is paying $5 to the county. Walmart's about 6, the mall's about 9. As soon as you get to a 2-story building, and this could be in Driggs, Idaho, or downtown Denver, it starts to shoot up. And it's not a proportional growth, it's an exponential growth. It's kind of insane. This is a 3-story building at $95 an acre, and then this is a 6-story building. So we're not even talking about nosebleed buildings or skyscrapers. This is a 6-story building right here. It's type 2, the fire code, I think, type 2 or type 3, I can't remember. But so we did a study in Sarasota, and they asked us to do maybe the cost-benefit side of things. We grabbed some suburban, well, sorry, before I get into that, if I were a developer building this thing here, when I build this, I've got hard costs and soft costs, right? I've got the cost that I pay the architect, I've got the cost that I pay the engineer, those are my soft costs, my permit fees, and then I've got my hard costs of the sewers, the curbs, all that stuff. Then I add my profit, divide it by the rooftops, and sell it. That's how that business model works, right? If I don't sell it, I lose my money. But I've got to get those costs back. When the government gets this gate open and they open it onto the street, does the government send the finance officer out there to say, what does it cost us in police costs, service costs, and what does it cost for all the physical stuff, the roads and sewers to get out there? And do they put a price tag on the tax bill saying we need to get our nut back? They say that? Of course not. We just have this kind of abstract value notion, and we just hope that the numbers work out. When Logitech built this little clicker here, don't you think they knew what the cost of making this thing was? Why aren't we doing that with cities? It's kind of mind-blowing. I mean, I'm saying that even when I was working here in West Palm Beach, I never met with the assessors. I didn't talk to the finance department. We were kind of left unto our own devices, not even seeing how this cash flow operated. And I'm not the first person to come on to this idea. This actually goes back to the 70s with this guy. Did y'all know that the Nixon administration published this document called The Cost of Sprawl? This was the first gas crisis. The federal government stepped up and said, look, y'all got a local problem. You can't afford your communities the way that you're developing them. So here are the numbers. He gave us the numbers. What's even more interesting about Florida is that Florida did the same thing. They did a statewide version of this, the Nixon document, in I think the late 80s, early 90s. Jim Duncan did the report. So our state actually produced this. The DCA has it. And they ran the total external public facility cost per dwelling unit. And as you spread people out, this is Wellington here, sorry Tim. As you spread people out, the cost of serving those people go up. And it's real simple, folks. You have a mile of pipe and you put 5 people on it, it's much more expensive than a mile of pipe with 5,000 people on it. So taking a couple of these numbers and saying, let's run the cash flow. If the government were to be a business, let's run the cash flow on some moderately suburban stuff versus downtown. We went out and found some moderately suburban multifamily, 357 units. This is literally at the eastern edge of the county in Sarasota. went into the downtown and plucked out 357 units, apples to apples, how these things cash out. So here's how they work. From your land consumed, so in your portfolio, the downtown consumes 1/10 the land area than the suburban pattern, same number of people. So you've exhausted 1/10 of your portfolio for the same people. It costs you 57% as much to service them. That's your cost. We just went into the tax rolls, pulled the taxes they produced, and this is the taxes they pay in the downtown versus the burbs. Same number of units. So you're making 870% more money, and it's costing you 57% as much to service them. So let's just do some math here. If this were my mortgage on my infrastructure, and this is my annual payment, and this is Raphael's mortgage and his annual payment, how long will it take the two of us to pay off our notes if you were to isolate us, apples to apples? It would take me 42 years to pay off my note. It takes him 3. Now in real estate development world, if I know my cost, my income, and my time period, I can do an ROI on this. So what's the municipal ROI on this? Well, it's a 18% ROI here for the downtown. It's a 2% ROI for the burbs. Now here's a dirty little secret. These roads don't last 42 years. So I still haven't even paid off my note. I'm already coming and complaining about those potholes and getting you to reinvest in my infrastructure, and I haven't even paid off that first one. It's all life cycle costing. We need to run these numbers. So I was presenting this in Idaho, and there's like a bunch of cowboys in the room. They're like, look, Joe, we're cowboys. This are way too many charts. Just show it to us in year 20. So this is what it looks like. You've made $34 million over your debt after 20 years. You're still in the hole $5 million in the burbs. That's the simple math of how this works. So when you're looking into your budget and you can't afford that art teacher, you can't build that new greenway, this money is hidden. It's already tied up in the system. You just have to run the numbers to see where you're bleeding it. So my job here is to bring you the data and evidence to show you what's going on financially so you can make better decisions. This is my napkin sketch on how that all works. Very sophisticated. The more data and evidence you have, the better your decision making, right? So this goes back to actually 1969. There's a book called Design with Nature. This man, Ian McHarg, is kind of known for doing GIS work and mostly gets attributed for ecological mapping. But when you read the book, it's actually more about economics and finance. And he says it pretty clearly. We have but one explicit model of the world, and is that it built upon economics. Money is our measure. So let's measure the money. Let's take the city, let's put the city aside, and use GIS tools to, typically you have your streets and infrastructure, your buildings are built on the streets and infrastructure, and then GIS is really good for mapping the ologies, your hydrology, your geology. And what we do is we kind of get in the middle of all of that and look at your tax productivity based on policy. So I'm going to map your tax productivity going forward. Just think of it the way we look at our bodies. We use x-rays to look at your hard tissue. I can show you your fillings and your teeth, right? Change the computer, I can show you different technology. I can show you your soft tissue with an MRI. I can even do a 3-dimensional image of your brain, right? So this is Palm Beach County. Oh, sorry, before I get into that. Palm Beach County is really big. It's very big. This is Delaware. You're the same land area size as Delaware. So it's like a state of Palm Beach County. You're twice the size of Rhode Island, and you're about half the size of Connecticut. And there's lessons in each of these places and how you should be thinking of your entire county as well. I just want you to realize this is a really big place. When we got your data, it was like a lot of data to work through our computers. So here's your county is a miles per tank. This is how we typically think of things. So you see Pratt Whitney up here coming up pretty hot. So the hotter the color, the higher the value. Gray is non-taxable, so this is a slough. This is all off the tax base. Here's the water catchment area here. And you see some hot spots. This is coming up purple out here in Ibis. But again, this isn't fair. This is the miles per tank. When we say miles per gallon, the map changes, right? Now we see a different level of efficiency. We're starting to see some hot zones in here, but it's harder to see on a map. Let's show it to you in 3D. This is kind of a little washed out, but can you tell me where downtown West Palm Beach is? It's like boom, right here. It actually comes up to about here is a spike. So you can see all of the heat effect of the ocean, which we know is there. That's the ocean effect of land value. Does that work better? There we go. Yeah, you can see it. Boca's got some heat on it there. So this is the ocean effect. So basically the zone just along the ocean, which is about, we just took the depth of the land area about maybe a couple blocks deep. It's pulling an average value of about 5.1 million an acre. Go from east of FEC to the lagoon, you're averaging about 1.5 million an acre. That's just to the FEC tracks. Going from the FEC tracks to I-95, it cuts in half, but you're still getting some value at 680,000 an acre. From 95 to 441, it cuts in half yet again. From 441 west, and we just kind of cut the edge of the slough here. It's about 176,000 an acre. Once you get west of that spot, it's really like you have two counties. That area is about 2,300 an acre. It's mostly ag land in Pahokee and Belglade, stuff like that. But basically this area, we're going to pretty much pull this stuff off and draw a line there and cut that out and just focus on this area. So this is like a state unto itself here. Just washing out the beach effect, because you really can't make another ocean. One of the lessons in this is downtown West Palm Beach is a new beach. You know, it's got the value, potency of what you find on the beachhead, which is really important. The other question to ask is, why isn't more of this stuff happening out here? How can you cultivate more wealth out in the other areas? Because this pattern doesn't give it to you. It's a very low rise, low density, low value proposition of productivity. This is just zooming into West Palm Beach and looking at the miles per tank and then the miles per gallon. And you know, these lakefront properties are really valuable, but they're also huge. So when you do the value per acre, it disappears from a productivity standpoint. This is West Palm's 3D model. And again, you see downtown. This is Grandview here. And here's Ibis. Riverwalk kind of flattens out. Zooming in a little bit in the core area, we'll come back into these neighborhoods, but this is a good tool to kind of think, okay, well, what's working over here and why isn't it working over here? And conversely, what can we learn here and replicate it on the north side? These are all tools to help you make better strategic moves to grow your own, cultivate your own wealth. Just for fun, we compared Asheville to West Palm Beach. Here's your CRA boundary area. You can kind of see it dotted in. You have a huge downtown. It's about 592 acres. Our downtown is about 360. You're 100,000 people, we're 90,000 people. Your MSA is much larger. But here's what's kind of interesting. Your value per acre is less than ours. And it's because a lot of it's due to the density. But a lot of it's also due to the fact that you have a tremendous amount of non-taxable land in your downtown. We have 66% taxable. We're a county seat too. You all are down at 55% taxable. So that's something we could talk about. The other thing is when you get into the actual historic core, which is kind of the Clematis Street zone, and our core is like about this big, we bump up to 11 million, you bump up to 9.8, let's say. And just for fun, this is a business opportunity if anybody wants to invest. Beer per capita, we've got a lot more beer in our downtown than you do. So we've got 15 breweries, we're at about 5.5 thousand people, 5,500 people per brewery. It's a real market opportunity for someone here. So zooming into your map, you can see the hot spots around Okeechobee, and they're big buildings. You're also getting hot spots in and around Clematis Street. These maps are a different color on the screen than they are here. This is a little bit washed out, so you're getting more reds and stuff. So taxable, non-taxable, your county has tremendous amounts of non-taxable land. You're like a 50-50 county, but these are huge areas, and it's kind of a hard qualifier because you really can't build in this stuff anyway, or you shouldn't. When you get into the city, this is kind of crazy, and it's because of this thing. So just to drop the catchment area out, you're about the same as your county, a 50-50 deal. When you get the city itself, though, which is kind of interesting, your city takes up, this is the entire county land area, and this is the footprint of West Palm Beach. So the city is about 2%, 2.5% of the entire county in land area, but as an economic effect, your worth in county property taxes is about 6%. So it's like a 3-to-1 productivity ratio for your footprint. When you get into downtown, your downtown is about 55, 45. You can really start to see the big finger of non-taxable stuff here. A lot of this is city, county, federal. This is a park, obviously. This is county here in the Kravitz Center. So it's just something to pay attention to. Might want to float this out there, parking lot B. Again, put it out there. Your downtown is pretty impressive. It's about 1.8% of this whole city's footprint, but from a value standpoint, it's about 23% of the city's wealth and value. That makes sense? It's really, really potent. So everybody in West Palm Beach, you should be very happy for your downtown. Because we're map nerds, we try to find other ways to show information, so we do these things called cartograms. A cartogram is where you do a two-dimensional distortion of value. This is a map of energy sales in the United States in 1921. So what they do is, like New York is the #1 energy seller, so it's the biggest one. Pennsylvania is half the size, it's #2, right? Or it's the second displacement. So we took your county and we just went ahead and cut off this side and just focused on that. We made, I'll mark I-95 so you can see it in the map. So we had to do this thing, there's a technical term for all this, I don't even know what it's called, but this is just making a hexagonal grid of your county. You can see the value of Palm Beach and downtown Palm Beach behind it. This is its cartogram. So what you're now seeing is the economic effect, what its economic footprint is. So let's put them side by side and let's drop I-95. So there's downtown is about that square. So its economic effect is about a 5-to-1 inside the county as a potency. Now granted, it's a CRA, so that's kind of masked a little bit. But just if we're a free, open cash flow system, that's what it'd be. Here's the other thing that's impressive about the county. This is I-95. So the area east of 95 is about a third to a half the size of the economic potency of the entire county. It's a very anecdotal way of looking at things, but I wanted to visually show you the economic effect of things east of 95. Retail sales, we were able to get this. Incidentally, this is illegal in the state of North Carolina, so it's always fun to come to a state where I can actually get this data. We could map it in Florida based on zip code. That's the only way they'd give it to us. Because we're a third party, we're not the city or the government. But this is the zip code for downtown. Now, just to show you a little anomaly here, though, the 33401 zip code actually grabs all of this stuff. So it goes all the way out to I-95. It's a really weird zip code. I'll come back to this in a second, but what you'll see is I actually drew a little box on the downtown boundary, and you'll see it floating on top of there. So in 2003, this is what your model looked like. Delray was doing all right. Y'all are doing all right in downtown. Here's the gardens out here, by the way. 2005, Delray picks up. It actually catches up to downtown. 2007, just before the crash, this is what's going on. You again peak out, and then the crash hits. Everybody drops down a little bit, and then it kind of levels off some. So here's what happened inside the zip code. These are the total sales: 2.4 billion, 3.1 billion. Here's the height of just before the crash at $4 billion worth of sales, and then it starts to drop off. Now, when I'm in other places, we typically find zip codes at different shapes. This is Texas. This is Travis County, Texas, this purple area. So this is a 6-county boundary capture of all the retail sales. And Austin is kind of in the center here. This is the booze sales per capita, or per acre. Their downtown was killing it. This neighborhood here was like their Grandview Heights. They were really happy that they have a drinking problem. And the college is kind of down here. This is hotel taxes produced. Again, downtown's killing it versus other areas. And then this is retail. So now you start to see the rest of the city come up. Now here's one of the things to think about. Downtown isn't a monolithically retail zoning category. When you get out to these other highway business areas, you'll find the entire corridor is zoned and used as commercial. This is the mall zone. That's where the malls are. When I presented this, one of their board of directors for their downtown association, they were my client on this, he's like, there's no way this is right. It's like, my daughter shops at the mall. She drops $250 a month. I said, yeah, how often is she there? He's like, every weekend. I said, 6, 8 times a month. How often are you in downtown buying lunch? What's your lunch cost? It's like $12. I said, multiply it times 20. He's like, oh. I said, you need to find a way to let your biases disappear and look at the data. Look at the data first. Don't go off these hunches. The hunches will inform you, but find the truth in the information. So there you are. This is Austin. This is Syracuse. Syracuse is not exactly the greatest downtown in the world. I'm from up that area. Here's their mall. That's a mall called Destiny right there, which is like a 6-story Mall of America thing. Canadians come down to this thing, and their downtown's still killing it. And this is Nashville. So when we find these boundaries that they're smaller around the downtown, these zip codes, it really shows you where the downtown's going. So one of my requests to Raphael is to talk with the state about doing a zip code split so you can get a better idea of how your downtown's doing and get BrandSmart out of that, and just at least see that. So let's get into your subject matter. Just going into individual, you saw the entire model. Now I'm just going to go in and pluck out the genetic material inside the body. So this is the average value of IBIS. Once you average the whole thing together and do a value per acre, it's pulling about $300,000 of value per acre. Riverwalk's a hair over at about, let's say, $400,000 an acre. Get into your boxes. BrandSmart's about $600,000. The mall hasn't been updated yet, so it's on there, but pay no attention to it. It still has to kick into the assessor's file. Walmart's about $650,000 an acre. Target is incredibly potent at $1.3 million an acre. Here's Best Buy at $800,000. We'll go ahead and hold on to Walmart as a case study, and I'll just float it up here on top of the slide. So you can see Walmart's about $650,000 an acre. This is $9 million, $9 million, and $3.5 million an acre. When you get into the residential incentive buildings, it starts to get kind of crazy. $14 million an acre for the 610 Clematis, $34 million an acre for the City Palms. And again, Walmart, $650,000 an acre. This is how they cash flow out. Here's Esperante at about $25 million an acre. One City Plaza at $56 million an acre. And then this is the Big Kahuna at about $100 million an acre. That's the top of your model, the highest spike in your community.
In the whole county?
In the whole county. From a per acre value productivity level. Incidentally, it's got a great view from up here on the pool. Now, that's all cool, Joe. These are big buildings. They're high value, expensive condos, of course, right? But what about your history? Talked about our soul earlier. Let's see the value of your soul. Let's go on to Clematis Street. This is a postcard from the 1950s. Here's the Como building at about $21 million of value per acre. The Anthony building is about $10 million of value per acre. So these buildings that actually architecturally reflect who you are, they also provide a potent value proposition to you. And again, the Walmart is $650,000 an acre. I mean, I can go ahead and ask you, what's going to be here 100 years from now, the Walmart or the Anthony building? Now, I can answer that for you again because I actually went to an assessors conference meeting where the head of Walmart's real estate says we design our buildings to last 15 years. I don't fault them for it. That's the rules they play by. They've designed it around a depreciable basis model. That's their game. So even in the west side of Clematis, you're seeing $2.4 million an acre. This is the old Woolworth building at $8.8 million. And this is a new building on Clematis, only 2 stories, pulling about $8 million an acre of value. So looking at those from a productivity standpoint, this is their value per acre. We call these ski slopes. It's a bar chart. Here's Ibis at 300,000. Here's Riverwalk at 380. Village Lakes at 439. BrandSmart, Walmart. Here's Grandview Heights. This is your neighborhood, pulling about $900,000 an acre in Grandview Heights. Here's Mar-a-Lago. I had to stick that in there. Antique Row townhouses, Target, Wellington Mall. This is for the DDA area. Y'all are averaging about 3.1 million, about 3 times Mar-a-Lago. I've got to correct this. This is what, Magnolia Court? Yes. On Tuxedo, next to the old Carefree Theater. The historic core of downtown is quite handsome. $8 million of value per acre. Here's City Place at $9.5 million. The Anthony Building, 610 Clematis, the Metropolitan, Esperante, 1 Clematis. It's a 5-story building, at $37 million of value per acre. And then here, of course, is Two City Plaza. Your tax flow from your city getting outside of the CRA area, is this all good, or is this too nerdy? Are we all right? Yeah. West Palm Beach tax revenue, this is IBIS, tax revenue per acre, Outlet Mall. Again, that shouldn't really be on there. Village Lakes, Brandsmart. These are shotgun houses on Douglas in the Northwest neighborhood. 3 of them are boarded up, and that's their tax productivity. Here's Walmart, Grandview Heights, Howley's, Havana's, Northwood apartment building. What's that? The Magnolia Court, and then these are the townhouses behind the convention center. The really thin little building, very productive, $80,000 an acre in city taxes. So just to make some apples and apples, well, for one, Howley's and Havana's are both more potent than Walmart, at 1.2 million and let's say 1.4 million an acre versus 600,000. 256 acres of Grandview Heights would equal the 600-acre IBIS, or Riverwalk, sorry. 367 acres of the shotgun houses would equal the 600-acre Riverwalk. So there's the shotgun houses I was talking about. The Magnolia townhouses are very, very potent. 40 acres of those would equal the 600-acre Riverwalk. So again, this is a lesson, is you can do more of these townhouses, find a good place to make them work, but they need that public realm to deal with that density. So it's just do more of that. Sorry. The Metropolitan is very potent. 10 acres in the Metropolitan would equal the 600-acre that. The Anthony building, if you had 1.2 acres of Anthony buildings, it would equal the 19-acre Walmart. So can you do more of those? Can you fill in Northwood? Can you do other areas where you can start to garner more community wealth? Incidentally, this building is almost as potent as the Darth Vader building. When you get into the numbers, you can start to see different things. You'd expect a tall building, to be more potent than that. And just for fun, because of Donald Trump, I just figured I'd grab all the Trump's properties and do a value per acre on the Donald. So he's pulling about $400,000 of value per acre for the towers, Mar-a-Lago, and his golf course. So he's actually less productive than the shotgun houses.
You're fired.
Yeah, I'm fired. So I'm just breaking things down with math, and it's just real simple rules of humble arithmetic. And getting into the cash flow, Raphael sent us all the data for the transportation funding, and you're broken down into zones. So your downtown zone, you're this little blue spot, it's your TCEA. You're in zone 2. It pretty much cuts up at Riviera Beach and follows the B line. The turnpike is your outside boundary. This is zone 3, 4, 5, and zone 0 is out here. We can pretty much ignore that one. Here's your tax productivity, showing the spikes of revenue coming out of the ground. Zooming into your zone, here's your road projects. Here's your productivity. So your little TCA area and the impact fees that you've produced, you take up about 1.5% of the entire zone area, yet you're producing 21% of the cash into that bucket. It's highly productive. Just getting into your TCA area, again, here's your productivity. So you're producing impact fees. Impact fees produced from 2004 to 2014. So it's a deeper, longer bank account than that, but we just had the 10-year window to look at. So over that 10 years, you've produced 9.3 million, and there's been a couple of projects. You can't really see it; it's kind of washed out. But you've spent about 6.4 million out of that.
How much of the impact fee is actually spent in our density?
Well, that's what these two little projects right here. You can see it better right there. There's the intersection of Australian and Okeechobee, and then fixing up Okeechobee to Tamarind.
So peanuts, basically.
Well, it's again, this is your call. Is that enough? Is it the right project? How did it work? Now we went and looked at your trip counts, and in all cases, all of your trips decreased in this throat area. The only thing that increased was somehow in here. So somehow cars are reproducing between here and here. But, and that's just, whether that was a big return on your investment, that, again, that's a conversation you all need to have. I'm just showing you the data. Now, in looking at other zones, this is North Lake, and then the, I think this is the, Seminole, Pratt Whitney. Just this project right here cost $49 million. $49 million. The tax productivity out here is $18,000 an acre. Is that the best use of your capital expenditures? Again, these are conversations you all need to have.
Well, that road's being paid by people who live on the east side.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, when I look at the numbers, y'all produce this, you spend that. These guys produce this and spend that. So whether or not there was a deeper bucket before 2004, I don't know. I mean, it's just look at the numbers, get into them, and ask some questions. So incidentally, the taxable basis per acre out at Loxahatchee is about $25 million or $25,000 an acre. You guys are at $3.1 million an acre.
Can you go back to the slide with traffic volumes, traffic counts?
Yeah. So this section right here is, let's see here. Probably see it better over here. This purple one is US 1 Okeechobee to Banyan. This orange one right here, or yellow one, is Australian Okeechobee to Banyan. This red one right here is Okeechobee, Australian to Tamarind, and this little green section is Tamarind to Rosemary.
So what I find really interesting about that is that in that period of time between 2005 and 2013, a lot of projects came online downtown. And then, in addition to the projects coming online, we had a lot of vacant residential units become occupied.
Like 4,000, right?
Yeah, we had a huge increase in occupancy rates. But we've seen a net decrease, in some cases a pretty steep decrease in traffic counts on all those roads, on those major road network roads.
I joked with Raphael, I was like, look, was that $6 million? I mean, heck, buy $1 million of bicycles and just leave them around downtown, you'd have a better transportation effect, you know, it's, but it's, you know, you can't do that according to the policy. You know, the policy is got to be spent on, was it new lane miles or something, new lane capacity. So that's just a conversation to have. It's just how.
Okay, so the policy is that when you collect these impact fees, they have to be spent on new lane miles, which automatically means downtown is not getting any of that money, right?
I mean,
is that what that means? Maybe not a question for Joe, but like, a clarification is you just mentioned that the policy is impact fees are spent on new lane miles.
Yeah.
So if the Carefree Theater next to Magnolia Court, which was one of your examples, if that comes online and redevelops, the money for that goes to new lane miles, which are not needed there.
Yeah,
which means we're a great donor for the western part of the county. Is that what the data is telling us?
well, this in the data that I have for 10 years, that's what it's telling me. But you know, I would do a deeper analysis and go deeper. You know, maybe they had a reserve account set up before that.
Right.
I don't know. But if that lane mile thing is part of the issue, then that's probably worth having the conversation because of your constraints within the urban environment.
At least to be flexible
Yeah.
with where spending could go.
So it's just, you know, from a level of, again, you're all in this corporation together. And this is a pretty handsome value per acre at $3 million. So how do you cultivate more community wealth?
So if you'd like to address some questions to me about our road program, I'm here to
Okay.
do it. Wait to the end or now or something like that. I don't want to
If you want to just,
interrupt.
if you want to just answer it now, that's cool.
You want to finish your presentation, then get into the questions, however you want to work it.
I'm cool. Just whatever you want. Go ahead.
So the question is about the lane miles? Yes.
Yeah.
Question is
It's all
about
for,
the policy.
The policy.
Are impact fees by policy required to go to new lane miles?
Yes.
And does that mean new construction of roads that were not there before in the field?
or
Or is
widening.
it reconstruction of, quadrille?
It could be for widening of existing roads. It would have to be for a new capacity.
What about narrowing existing roads?
No, but, and this is gonna be an interesting discussion about impact fees and how they're spent. I'm not sure if this is the right time for it. So the impact fees are collected to create a regional road network. There are actually 5 impact fee zones. And the intent is because the downtown is not an island. The downtown is part of a larger region. The average trip length from downtown for a work-based trip is 14.6 miles. So people aren't just commuting downtown. The money that has been collected has been used to build the overall network of roads. If we just looked at the downtown area, which is probably about, I think, two square miles, roughly,
About that, yeah.
and made those all little impact fee zones, we would have something in the order of 400 of them in the eastern part of Palm Beach County, the developable part. So while I understand that there's a question to be had about how you spend your money where it's collected, it's also a question of where the impacts. People are driving in Okeechobee, in Belvedere, and Australian, that are coming to work downtown, and it's built that road network.
But I think your point seems to be, live wherever you want to live, that's great, but pay your freight. If you need the regional road network because you decided to live and you need Seminole Pratt Whitney Road, what we're seeing based on the data is that suburbia isn't necessarily paying its freight. Is that kind of what we're starting to look at?
And I think it's a great point of view. There's several ways of looking at impact fees. We do it based on only trips. Another possible way of looking at it is vehicle miles traveled.
Right.
So that we don't have that process now, but it's kind of hard to calculate because you don't know exactly how far people are going to be traveling. But I think that's one potential answer to that, in that instead of just 10 trips per house or how many trips per 1,000 square feet of retail, it should be that plus how long that is.
I mean, we're actually considering, we're doing a project in Lafayette where we actually have all of that data. And we're breaking the road costs. So, with this is a transfer. This is a transfer of money out to an area that's inherently not going to cede a lot of value back. Building expensive roads that are going to be super expensive 30 years from now. And it's just not going to have the taxable basis to pay for it. These properties will never grow beyond maybe $100,000 of value per acre once you fill the whole thing in, if that. So that's what we're talking about in Lafayette is running a metric that the further you're out, the more of the road system you own, because you'd need more of it. And so it is more based on a VMT model, and we're doing a kind of a phased approach to it. So
that's another way of slicing it.
Yeah, well, the county actually has the tiered system that Frank Duke put in place for planning. Maybe use the tiered system as a metric on top of that model. I mean, just have the conversations, what I'm saying.
Sure.
I want a follow-up question, which is, I've been here for 30 years, and for 30 years the conversation's been about road construction only, as the only method of transportation. And so my question is, why aren't we also looking at how we spend the money, besides the issue that Anthea brought up, which is disproportionate to the suburbs compared to the
I can address that.
Like a mobility fee instead or something.
Yes, precisely. And so in the 1980s, the people of Palm Beach County actually voted the countywide road impact fee because there was all this growth going on and very little construction. That's how we're able to impose the impact fee on not just the unincorporated area, but the municipalities. There's another way of doing that, and that is mobility fees. See, right now, the methodology for calculating it is the cost of a lane mile of road and how much a house consumes or an apartment consumes in terms of that. In fact, I think we've had a discussion with my boss, George Webb, with a couple of bigger cities, West Palm, and I think Delray, maybe Boca, about maybe someday we need to go to a mobility fee. Mobility fee is calculated based on other investments into other transportation uses. But our current charter only talks about roads. So if there's some way of doing a voluntary buy-in by the municipalities to do mobility fees, or to go before the voters one more time and say, no more road impact fee, now mobility fee. There are several examples of mobility fees in Florida where they've decided that what's my cost of buying buses?
Right, Broward changed their model, so.
And amortizing that. So that's a discussion. We just don't know how to get there right now with our current ability to only assess impact fees. but it's a discussion that needs to be had at some
Yeah,
point.
so back to the zones real quick. Here's zone 5. Here's what they produce per square mile versus what they spend. About 56% of their money comes back in that zone. Zone 4, which is Boynton area to Lake Worth, they get a little bit more, about 112% of their money they create. Zone 3, west of the Turnpike, they get about 256% of the money they create. You guys in zone 2, this is what you create, this is what you get back, about 73%. And then zone 1, they get a little bit more than double their money back in expenses. And again, this is over a 10-year window. These are conversations to have. At the end of the day, these are policies, people. Moses didn't deliver them to you. You can change these things. You know, it's just have the conversation, put data out there, understand what's going on and how it's being used, and make some good financial decisions.
Man,
Sure.
because what I find fascinating about this, Joe, is that you're presenting the science and the numbers here, which is data, right? But part of this, thank you, part of the art of this, I think, is the pattern of development. What I find interesting is that obviously the bigger buildings in downtown generate greater revenue. The more density, the bigger the building, et cetera, it's going to make more money. But there also seems to be cases where smaller buildings are outperforming larger buildings in other locations on an acre basis. And that has to do, I think, with the quality of place too, the proximity of the investment to the quality of place as well. So a 2-story building out at 441 and Okeechobee isn't going to perform the same way that a 2-story building on Clematis is going to perform, even though it's the same size. And so there's an art to this as well, which is the urbanist part of it, which I think we need to keep in mind. You know, Loxahatchee will probably never generate more revenue than it is now unless it fills in a little bit more, because that pattern of development is established. But I think when we're making policy decisions, it's, are we going to change the pattern of development in areas that we're going to redevelop in the future? I think that's a big piece of it.
No, it's totally true. And just quality of place is incredibly important. But all of those measures are things that you can manage. You know, it's like you can make better pedestrian environments. You just look at your tissue. This is just a body mass index check. I'm showing you your blood pressure. Where is it working? Where is it not? And just make more decisions in the future based on that. You know, I like to nerd out about a lot of this stuff, like your economic heart monitor. But this is what we typically see. This is Orange County, North Carolina. This is Chapel Hill, Carborough, and Hillsborough. And so you see these spikes. You can tell where Main Street is in Chapel Hill, Carborough, and even Little Hillsborough down here. Asheville, we've got our main spike in our downtown, but we have this kind of satellite of little pops that pop up all over the place. And so when we look at our county, we see this spike and then it flattens out. So we've got these pop-ups that happen. This is looking at your county, just laying it flat on the table and looking north. You've got this really nice, handsome pop right here, and then it just nothing. So extrapolating that out to the county, looking east, looking from the ocean into the community, you see how you get these spikes, right? So you're doing it north and south, take it east and west. You know, so this is what you look like from the ocean. And then, so why not add a couple little hills out there somehow? And that's going to take working with the county, because Okeechobee splits the city north and south, and that's your main trunk. And you're not going to be able to do that in the scale that road's in right now. And that's going to be a conversation with the engineering department. You can't, it's an aorta. You need some capillaries going on, because that's the pedestrian environment. So people say to me, they're like, well, Joe, that's fine. You know, people want that pattern of growth. This is what we want. We're Americans. And so I always think, like, what if I had an entire county that just chose one pattern of development? Like the Ghost of Christmas Future in Christmas Carol, right? I'm going to show you the future with this place. And we got it in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Y'all know Gwinnett County, Georgia? This place is fascinating. When I did their study, they gave me a rule. They said, look, Joe, you're not allowed to use the word urban, city, town, or municipal in your report. Those are offensive words in our community. I was like, all right, whatever. And then we pulled their data. The Chamber of Commerce was my client here. And they told me, they're like, look, Joe, look, we're rural people here. We're rural people. We're not the city folk. So here's Atlanta. This is Gwinnett County. Lawrenceville is the county seat. Y'all know Lawrenceville? I never heard of it. I just kind of showed up. Incidentally, Larry Flint was shot there. That's like its claim to fame. But there's 800,000 people in Lawrenceville, or in Gwinnett County. I was blown away, and I called up my client. I was like, 800,000 is huge. And she's like, but honey, look, you don't understand. We are 460 square miles. All right, what do I know? So let's take 800,000 people, divide it by 460. That's 1,900 people per square mile. Each of these people is 100 people, right? It's less dense than DeKalb. You follow me here? We had all this other data, so we just went ahead and put it up there. And as I was presenting to the audience, I was like, anybody know what's in Mecklenburg, North Carolina? Somebody goes, Charlotte. I'm like, yeah, as a city planner, I have no clue how you guys got denser than Mecklenburg and you didn't produce a Charlotte. Your biggest town is 35,000 people, which is Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Not only have you not produced a Charlotte, you didn't produce a Nashville, an Austin, a Raleigh, or even an Asheville. What the hell did you guys do? And it just blew my mind. And so we did their model, and I'm looking at it, and Josh, who I work with, was making the model, and I'm standing at his computer. I'm like, what the hell? It's just like this big yellow splat. I'm like, could you turn it on its side? Let's see what's going on here. And I'm like, wow, there's no spike at all. It's just a big thick carpet. You know, I mean, you saw this. This is what we typically see, right? So this is what they got. These are their choices. And they just were dead against letting any town grow beyond a certain limit. So the county actually competed against the towns, put in all this horizontal infrastructure, and this is the thickest value they produced under one pattern. So let's recap. This is the top value in Gwinnett County, which is the most dense community on this chart. This is where they're peaking out with their value. I asked them, I said, so are you guys having problems paying your bills? And they're like, oh yeah, we can't afford anything. So just to rub it in a little bit, this is Nashville's county, Austin's county, and Gwinnett County, side by side at the same scale. So we ran an economic heart monitor to check their pulses. And yeah, these guys peak out at 192, they peak out at 476 million, and then these guys are at 8 million. That's what they're stuck with.
And they have the most density.
Yep. So when we say the word density, sometimes we need to realize what that means. And it's funny, when I presented this, they had me present at night, and this one commissioner was just like, but we're not urban people. And I'm like, look, the National Board of Realtors says that 30% of your marketplace would choose that product if you built it. Now let's assume the National Board of Realtors doesn't understand anything about real estate. They're idiots. They're 200% wrong. What's 10% of 800,000 people? And she goes, 80,000. I'm like, yeah, you should have made an Asheville. You didn't. That's what you got. So there are behavioral tricks going on in the way how we develop and how we build things. And I'm going to give you like a one snapshot. This is my favorite one. We'll go into every community we go into, we pull the buildings off and set the buildings aside. And we only look at the dirt value, just the dirt. Just to bench test what's going on in the real estate market. There's no assessor in here, is there? This is one of my favorite tricks. So I'm presenting this in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and this is their dirt value. So again, the hotter the color, the higher the value. This is how you expect the world to work. Everybody in this neighborhood has the same value per acre at $15,000, right? You and all your neighbors, everybody's dirt's the same, per square foot, per square inch, per acre, doesn't matter. Seems fair. When I was presenting this, I was like, what's going on here? This is $15,000 an acre, and as soon as you cross the street, it jumps up to $35,000 an acre. How could land double in value in the same zoning category just by crossing the street? Anybody know this answer? The tax assessor was sitting in the front row, and she raises her hand. And she's like, you don't understand. And I said, okay, try me. She goes, well, the more land you have, the lower the value. The mayor just about spat coffee out of his nose. Think of that. The more land you have, the lower the value. I said, so hold on a minute. I got 3/4 of a mile of road here, 3/4 of a mile of road here, another half mile and a half mile. I've got 3 miles of infrastructure. I've got the biggest site on the street, which means the most capacity. More capacity, more stuff, more car trips, more car accidents, more police calls, more fire calls. I get more of your stuff, and you charge me less for it. She's like, yeah, that's our standard. Seriously, I presented this at the International Association of Assessing Officers. Their magazine is called Fair and Equitable. I'm like, guys, how is this fair or equitable? And they're like, it's not. And they're laughing. I'm like, well, shouldn't you change it? And they're like, we should. And I'm like, well, how do you change it? They're like, go talk to Larry Clark. Seriously, I'm not making this up. I go talk to Larry Clark. I'm like, Larry, what do you think of this? And he's like, that seems silly. And I'm like, where'd the standard come from? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, did Moses deliver it to you? Where'd this thing come from? And he's like, well, maybe we should change that. We found this in your community too. There's some wild inequities. You see a lot of them over here in Palm Beach. And you see some of them even on Clematis Street. We're just crossing the street. The value drops by millions of dollars an acre just by crossing the street. So it's just something to be aware of. Have a conversation with your assessor. You can modify this. Again, Moses didn't create these standards. When I first started practicing planning, we had a standard of 2 parking spaces per residential unit. Threw that out. You know, there's certain things you can learn from. So realize these aren't invisible market forces that are making people do things. If you're going to give them tax breaks, if you're going to build all of their infrastructure for them, you're basically putting a fire hose on the property and telling people to go there. So these are policies you can all change. So just to kind of recap, West Palm Beach is worth $8.3 billion. That's with a B. West Palm Beach is worth more than all the professional sports teams in Florida combined. You're about 13.3 Miami Heats. That's another way of looking at it. And I can tell you Mickey Anderson knows D-Wade's towel bill. You know, I know that cups in our nightclub cost 5 cents a piece. Why do I know that? Because we ran the numbers going from plastic cups to cornstarch-based compostable cups. We had to make the numbers work. So the challenge to your community now is, what do you do with the numbers? How do you make better decisions? How do you cultivate investments? Where you're subsidizing things, make sure you can afford to do that. Or at least illuminate people to realize that they are being subsidized because it's happening. And challenge you to do the math. Thank you.
Great. Well, that was eye-opening. I'd just like to open it up to questions. I mean, this is my 3rd run through with Joe on this, and I've learned a lot.
Joe, I'm Howard Pink, as board chair of DDA. I was at the commission work session presentation. Do you mind going back more towards the front? It kept jumping out at me, both presentations were downtown at 1.7%, the comparison. Do you recall which one I'm talking about?
The pie. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have once I see it, I've got a, yeah, that's pretty dramatic right there. And I guess my question is, and Raphael and Tanique and everybody at DDA is always on top of this. We're always trying to, sort of leverage this kind of information, because we're always talking about downtown being the economic engine of the city. With your experience in other places, do you have any thoughts, suggestions on how we can really leverage something like this in terms of a public message and so forth?
Well, from a public message standpoint, a lot of it is, well, you're doing this here, you're videotaping this, you're memorializing this information. We're going to write a report that has this data in it. That's a PDF. Basically, those can be emailed around to anybody. Knowing these numbers on the board and having them on the tip of your tongue. When I was on our board in Asheville for our downtown association, we were all like robots. We produce $1.7 million in city taxes and $2.3 million a year in county taxes. And we just beat it into everybody's heads.
Because that's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, but you also have a CRA here. What you have that's actually quite awesome, and personally I think a little underutilized, the majority of this pie of creation of value is captured inside the CRA. In Asheville, we have to go begging to the county like paupers, saying, please give us some of our money back. And they're just like, no, we're using it over here. And then those people end up, you know, we get unbelievably spiteful things from our county brothers and sisters in Asheville. But I think that's something that you really should think about turning that engine on a little bit. There's also some lessons in this study, back to the townhouses that are outside of downtown, is those are lessons that the city can capitalize on and put a lot more effort on, that the city's going to see a higher return to the whole community on. And maybe that's worth more of an effort than building a dog park out in some place that's making $100,000 an acre of value or something. You know, where's the biggest bang for your buck? Did that get close to your comment?
Joe, in your discussions of the values per acre and the tax revenues per acre, I'm curious as to why there was no reference to two premier properties in West Palm Beach, Watermark, one Watermark and Phillips Point.
Phillips Point. Those are about $111 million an acre of value.
The building you pointed to in Asheville earlier, I'm just curious what it is. What's the income stream in that building that it was able to go from 300,000 to 11 million in, you know, X number of years?
Well, for one, the owner of this building right here, his family owned the building, free and clear, not motivated seller, not a motivated renter. He would only rent that building, a 6-story building, if somebody rented the entire building. People do weird things. You know, you're dealing with humans. You know, it's not rational. We eventually chiseled that away from him. The only people that were living in that were pigeons. 4 dumpster loads full of pigeon poop out of that building. Dumpsters.
Chisel?
Yeah. And, you know, we used historic tax credits. This was the first condo building in all of downtown Asheville. No one knew how to do that. You know, just weird anomalies like that. And we actually sold these units, phenomenal units. We sold them for like $250,000 a pop. They ended up, they're now selling for like $500,000. You know, we were trying to just prime the market, show people that people would actually live downtown. So we're known in the development parlance as a patient investor. We're in it for the long haul because we have other parcels all around town. We don't put a recreation room in our buildings because our recreation room is called the nightclub, and we let everybody use it. Difficult business to manage, but fun.
Bill Jacobson, you made a comment earlier on or very early on in your presentation about how many people had lived in a unit that's 300 to 450 or whatever in square feet. We have a minimum size unit in downtown, and it doesn't come anywhere close to the unit size that you're talking about. And it brings to mind the fact that the city has not reviewed its downtown master plan for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years? Whatever it's been, 7 years. And we don't seem to have any incentive, either economic or otherwise, for the city commission to look at the downtown master plan and be able to react more quickly to changes in the marketplace, you know, different types of demand and things like that. I mean, have you, in your experiences with various municipalities and counties, come across situations where the city finds itself participating in these reviews or having public input on a more frequent basis than what we have here?
You know, you're asking the wrong person on that. I'm just going to be honest with you. When I moved here in 1998, the master plan was 2 years old. Right out the door, I had people telling me the master plan was too old and we needed to review it. 2 years. We hadn't even gotten
that conversation.
We hadn't even gotten a new building. And land values were too expensive. We need to raise building heights. And I got in trouble because I was like, I just asked a simple question. I'm like, well, if I raise building heights, isn't it going to raise value? I got in trouble for that.
And that's exactly what happened.
And it's just like, so
It continues to.
it's going to continue to happen. You've got property speculation going on. These are the parcels colored in red. You can see it better here. Of all the parcels where the land value exceeds the improvement value. These people are bleeding you dry. They're holding everybody hostage. Let's take a little step back. Y'all ever heard of Henry George? Henry George is a tax economist from the late 1800s who came up with this concept of removing improvement value. There's a couple things going on here. When I presented at the assessors conference and presented what you just saw, the head of Walmart's real estate was in my conference. And I'm just watching his face. And I had to stop my presentation. I said, look, this isn't personal. It's like, it's not about the player, it's the game. I'm an architect. When you think about the way that the tax system is set up, there's a perverse incentive to build real cheap stuff in your community. The cheaper the building I make, the lower the taxes I pay, period. The more land I consume, the lower the taxes I pay. Just be conscious of that. Henry George developed this tax system because of property speculation that was hot in the 1800s in the urban environment, and only a few people held that land, and they could hold the entire city hostage. So he's like, well, why don't we just change that incentive, get better buildings, and then have more land released into the marketplace because people wouldn't have the incentive to hold it. Elizabeth Maggie Phillips, aside from having the most awesome eyebrows ever, she was a Georgist, and she invented a board game to teach children Georgist principles because she didn't think that adults were sophisticated enough or had the patience enough to learn it, and she made this game. It was called the Landlord's Game then. Milton Bradley ended up stealing it from her. But it was all about location, land assembly, and putting buildings on it. That's George's theory. When I was here, I had the same conversation with Ed Mitchell. All down Banyan Boulevard is this gaping hole in our community, or your community now. And I was frustrated. I'm like, there's no motivation for these people to sell. It's driving the market forces up. We need to find some other penalty. You all have impact fees. Impact fees are totally illegal in the state of North Carolina. It's an incredibly powerful tool. You're paying for all the garbage trucks to go by. You're paying for all of that. You're paying for the police department to go survey those vacant lots. Charge them for it. Just to show you one quick little example here, if I get the lights again. This is probably the next step to go for you all. We were in Chattanooga doing the study. Here's their downtown. This is their hipster area. This is where all everybody with tattoos on their faces live and everything. They bicycle across this bridge. Across the river, up in this neighborhood, this developer from Atlanta was proposing a Publix grocery store, big box, surface parking lot. They had these urban design guidelines. The mayor's like, we need jobs, we need this Publix, screw all the urban design guidelines, get rid of them. And well,
Sounds familiar.
hang on.
Jump the gun.
So here's the site. In the neighborhood, they already have mixed-use buildings going on. They already have a local guy who built this thing called Green Life, which is Whole Foods ended up buying them. So we've got an urban grocer comp, and we got townhouses. So I've got the ingredients of urbanism already here in the marketplace. The market has proven it works. So why would we not do that? Why would we go backward? But let's just run the numbers. So we've got comps of existing Publix, suburban Publix in the marketplace. I know their values and their square footages. Here's the office building above retail in the neighborhood. Here's residential above retail, so I have those comps. This is the grocer. It's called a deep throat model. You have your box with a liner building pasted on the front with yoga studios and whatnot in here. Publix has done crazy things. This is the Publix in Miami Beach where you actually drive up on the roof. This is like a UFO hit it, but it's a conveyor belt to get you to the garage. You guys have done a cool Publix. West Palm Beach, small footprint Publix, two-sided face building. So you've proven that you could do something different. Here's the site, 34-foot of grade change. It's a hill. The developer is cutting into the hill, dropping a box, and what I wanted to show people was all of these houses now get to look at a roof, so what's going to do to their value. And here's your future quarter-mile-long graffiti wall right here. But we're also running the taxes, but I'm going to come back to that. So what if you did a little urban design 101? Throw some townhouses up here, so you have housing facing housing, put a couple corner buildings, keep your parking lot, call it a day. This is what you get. Do a better site design, do what the local guy did, put it up against the street, put half a liner building, ring the site, keep it all parking in the center. Maybe in the future drop a building in there, but it'll just be a parking for now. Go crazy, do Miami Beach, drive up on the roof, densify the heck out of it. This is the highest density one we did. Back it down to you guys, West Palm Beach footprint, big parking area, housing. And then let's say you've pissed the developer off, he goes back to Atlanta, you just get what the neighborhood's already producing, mixed-use buildings and townhouses. Okay, let's recap. This is the taxes the site's currently paying. There's no motivation to sell. This guy's coming in and proposing this. The mayor's like, hey, we're getting 3 times the money, right? If you just add townhouses, this is what you get. If you do better site design, this is the value of design right here. Go crazy, do Miami Beach, back it down to West Palm Beach, and a no-build scenario. Now, just taking a couple of these here and just saying, let's just compare these two. Here's what they look like. That with your big retaining wall versus this. Cash flow on an annual basis to the city and taxes. When you make these decisions, you're stuck with it for 20 years. This property will stay that way for 20 years before it makes sense for Publix to rethink itself. So let's just run the numbers, net present value out to 20 years. These are the numbers we're really talking about. You're taking $900,000, you're foregoing millions of dollars. So why don't you just take $2 million out of the general fund and just hand it to them? Say, please do this one. You'd still be ahead of the game by 2.2 million bucks. So you've got these decisions all around. You know, it's like, and there's all up and down Dixie, you see them.
What was the ultimate decision there?
The ultimate decision was this, and the mayor got thrown out of office.
Are they building it now?
It's built.
It's built.
Was the developer opposed to an alternative?
The developer was from Atlanta, and he was just like, this is what I do. That's all I do. You know, there's certain people inside the development industry, they're one-trick ponies.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's other developers that actually have wanted to do some complexity. You have to seek them out. I mean, you've got the perfect example right here. You know, City Place. Those are developers that we're going to, okay, we'll do mixed use. You know, the developers are used to, and they were actually, I think, even,
Well,
When they came in,
they tried to back out,
yeah,
but,
they tried to do the model to the left.
Well, that's.
Oh, that's
Remember
Publix.
the Publix,
Yeah.
the Publix was at downtown Publix, it's now where the Archstone building or the Prada is.
remember
Yeah.
that?
And that was a big fight, and then they ended up slipping into City Place when Whole Foods or Wild Oats or whatever it was.
No, but that was important. Our master plan said that where the Prado is now had to be a two-story building. And Publix came into downtown in 2000, and said, we want to build this. And the commission at the time sat on the dais and told Joe, I was sitting behind him because he was lead, that if you can figure out how to get this project to us, we will approve it.
Yeah.
But the master plan's administration route at that point didn't offer that route. So what happened? Publix ended up at City Place, and then Prado's got an 8-story mixed-use building on it right now. So that happened here, only our city managed to make the right decision in that instance.
The infill, or the minor townhouses at the back end of the convention center is another good example.
Yeah.
Locally.
The
where-
county was giving us landscape.
Well, yeah, we would have gotten a landscape buffer in that neighborhood, looking at, trying to disguise a parking garage that would come later. But instead, what was it, 80,000 per acre that it's
Yeah.
producing in
Taxes, yeah.
taxable value?
yeah.
I mean,
No, that's the taxes, 80,000.
80,000.
And I remember at the time, the argument was, there's no way anybody's gonna live in a townhouse that's only 38 feet deep.
Yeah.
Really appreciate your study here, and I don't think it's for nerds. I think it's a very powerful tool. I remember almost 20 years ago, and I think Bob will remember this too, when City Place was making their presentation to win the project in the 1990s, they had a chart. They had a PowerPoint at the time, or a slideshow, and it showed how the bonding issues, how if the city would put in the $80 million in the bond, and what was it, I think 25 years it would be paid off, and it actually got paid off in 18 years or something like that.
17.
And I think that was the most powerful time I've ever seen anybody use economics to explain why urbanism, makes a lot of sense. So that's a comment that I want to make. The question, the only critique I have of your PowerPoint is that you immediately discarded the glades, because the glades are the glades, and I mean it's like, and I think you even mentioned there's two worlds here. Have you done studies in other places where there's this kind of radical, we have two completely different worlds, and there are people that are working out there trying to, bring that place back, and it's just not happening. So have you had other places where these kind of extremes that you've studied, and are there any solutions for places like Belglade and Pahokee and South Bay?
Yeah, this was ultimately this is a contract with the downtown. The data comes at a county lump. We didn't drill into. Pahokee, Belglade. There are some serious social, economic, cultural issues out there. It's like being out in Haiti. But ultimately they're brothers and sisters of you all, and I think that's, it's going to require a larger conversation about what to do. And just the dichotomy to go from Palm Beach to Belglade is just mind-blowing. From a land area perspective, there's counties where I'm living now where you have these huge swaths of federal forests that take taxable land away. But I think the lesson, I don't know, it would take a deeper drill into Pahokee and Belglade to see what the issues are, and how they're doing their spending, where are they spending their money. You know, oftentimes what we find, one of my dream studies is doing a study between Detroit and Windsor, Canada. One of the things that I'm starting to figure out doing work in Canada, they don't tax them any higher there. They just don't build the roads that we do. So if you look at everybody's got the same tax base, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, and then we go off and build all of these roads. Well, what happens when it snows? We've got more roads to plow. So not only do we have more sunk costs, we've got more maintenance costs. In Canada, they don't do the infrastructure expenditures that we have, and they just live a little bit denser. And they're just like, well, we got to pay for all of this stuff. And they have a higher threshold on human capital and human investment. So they pay for job training, drug addiction counseling, LGBT services, you name it. So when you follow the math on this, they can invest more in their humans than in their asphalt. And when they do that, they have a different level of human capacity and education, entrepreneurialism. The number that's really telling for me is homicides. Per 100,000 people in Detroit, there are 9 people that get killed every year. In Windsor, it's 0.7. They have the same unemployment issues, same manufacturing issues. It's the same damn thing, it's just across a river. So I think, to me, that would be the way I would look at Pahokee and Belglade is where are they spending their money?
You know, it's fascinating because on one end of Southern Boulevard, you've got Belglade, and on the other end of Southern Boulevard, you've got Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah. A big question for me is, I don't know how, I was like, I didn't know that the golf course was non-taxable. So I think y'all should go play around.
Because it's a lease from the county. Is that why?
I don't know.
Okay, so I have a,
Dennis, do you know? I don't know. Is it a lease?
Right? He leased it from the county.
Okay. Sounds like a TIF or something. Or in New York, they call them pilots, pilot deals.
okay, so I think it's interesting that clearly design matters, right? Because what Dana's comment earlier, that a 2-story building on Clematis is not equal to a 2-story building on State Road 7. And so as you're trying to give us this advice as we grow, while it's really interesting to talk about downtown and how far we've come and how successful the area clearly is in the eastern communities, is there any plan to show this to our county leadership, our county commissioners who are making the land use decisions that are in the flatline area? Because it seems like the city has worked really hard to bring the downtown core back, but we still are set up where it's very easy to continue suburban development in the pattern that leads to gated communities feeding off of arterials and all of those things that are expensive to maintain, lower density. Where's Raphael? I'm just trying to see, because this is great that the city and the DDA are seeing this, but it seems like now that we've all seen it, it's the county that really needs to see.
The short answer is yes. And, we're just getting this. It's a lot of information. And, this was presented at a mayor commission work session earlier this week on Monday. So, yeah, our city leadership saw it. They all, I think, I saw a bunch of light bulbs coming on, which was great. I think the next conversation, as you suggest, is everybody at the table and here's what we've learned. What can we collectively do to improve everyone's lot in this? I will say that I feel a sense of urgency in the downtown area with all of the development that's getting ready to come online. And the rapidly evolving way that we're looking at how we want to address mobility challenges, the way we're looking at the downtown public realm and what we should really use it for. Like, what's the best use of that space between the buildings, and the growing residential population and the growing connection to our historic neighborhoods on the north and south. You know, we're not gonna, obviously we don't want to widen any roads there, but we do want to provide mobility options, and progressively so. So I feel a sense of urgency to figure out how to get that right sooner rather than later, because we're going to miss a bunch of money if we don't get it right soon.
I have one other comment, and you were involved with this. We spent 2 years studying the the redevelopment and concepts for redevelopment of South Dixie from Okeechobee Boulevard to the Spillway. I mean, that's an area that has gotten, you know, some exposure recently, and I think that the concepts that you're presenting here really need to be thought about in terms of what the city will allow, how the city is thinking, what the city wants to vision for that area. Because especially now that they're talking about 8111 property and filling in between there. So, you know, I urge people, when you're talking to your commissioners, city and county, well, I mean, the state and the county are involved because we've got US 1, you know, as our spine down there. So I just think it's an incredibly important conversation to have as far as that property is concerned. It was 2 years worth of study on this, and you know, now we have to see what comes out of it.
Well, Joe, one of the things that you showed that I thought was fascinating was, sorry. Thank you, sorry about that. One of the things that I thought was fascinating was that in one of your hockey stick graphs, you were going from out west and then all the way into, you know, the downtown core. One of the examples you had is, I thought, was the new what's it called? The Antique Row Village.
Right.
Yeah.
Which has, where is it?
Right there.
Go back.
There it is.
Those numbers haven't come on.
Yeah, I would more use the tuxedo one.
Okay. But still, I mean, this is a new infill project. It's not enormous in its size, and it's throwing off tremendous numbers, you know, yeah, and it does all the things that it should do in terms of, you know, addressing the street. It's a great example, I think.
But if you look at the characteristics of that roadway and we think about the impact of place, right? You know, it's a 4-lane, undivided thoroughfare with, you know, whatever, 20,000 vehicles a day on it. If it was more suited to the context, if the roadway fit the context that it sits in, that would be a bigger number. And, you know, so we address the road, but then we also make more money on it.
When you look at this landmass and say we need to think about everybody driving all over the place at 14,000 miles per year, you know, could you imagine saying that for here? Could you imagine taking that one-size-fits-all statewide? And that's what you've done. You know, it's like you wouldn't do it here even. You know, so it's like, why can't Providence be different than the rest of Rhode Island? Why can't you have a conversation where New Haven is different from Hartford? And that, you know, maybe there's different size roads or different, you know, it shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all kind of conversation. And if you want to make a New Canaan happen out Okeechobee, that's a totally different animal than the system that they're building out there. So, and it's just, I don't think when you look at transportation systems and you see it as this monolithic movement of blood vessels, you know, it doesn't work that way. And so, I mean, we learned that. Again, I think a lot of, this city's actually in great shape as far as what you all have accomplished in your downtown. You know, it's nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed about. You've accomplished monumental things. So what can we learn from West Palm Beach that can be replicated in Palm Beach County?
Well, look where Nancy Graham started. I mean, the city was broke when she took
Yeah.
office.
So,
Have you ever measured,
Very much. Have you ever used the same type of, let's say, land value assessment that you're doing here, but in typology of parking space and street space? So that's one question I have. Because it seems, obviously, going back to quality, depending what you're building, it's going to change your value.
you know, I mean, like the street design?
Like if you're comparing an on-street parking to a garage to a land lot, have you done that same type of money value in terms of parking spaces?
We haven't done it directly, but there's economic studies that talk about trip capture, having turnover, the higher turnover spaces on the street versus parking. The cost of a parking garage is really expensive, at $38,000 a space, versus a surface lot's real cheap. Now, conversely, the surface lot is going to give you a lower tax value because the assessor's just going to go out there and go, well, look, I just see asphalt. You know, there's no building there. So it's not an easy answer to that. The other thing that maybe my answer that I'd give you for this would be more, we have done a road diet analysis and what's happened with the real estate value and then what happens when you neck the road down and how the real estate value goes up. There's plenty of cities that have data to show the trending of what happens in that. And we have modeled those in High Point, North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, and even Asheville. So that we've seen that actually increases value because it brings in an urban product where the street is inherently connected to that land use like a species. And you know, I don't go out into a big surface parking lot and put a bush and hope that birds show up. It's just not going to happen. The birds need other stuff. They need water. They need shade. They need fruit. You know, that kind of thing. So the habitat of an urban species needs that neck down road. It can't handle the regional collector. So it's just, that's more the conversation to get the fit going.
It just seems that when you were showing the slide where you have the lands or the pieces of land that are being locked down by, you know, it just being emptied and owned by a few people, some of those spaces are, I mean, utilized maybe as parking space and so on. But to create an argument to change that or to change policy or to bring in a new type of financial performance-based, let's say taxation or something like that, I think tying the way that we park or use our cars or like you're saying the road diets to your analysis of land is going to really strengthen, I guess, how to fix the...
They're connected.
Okay.
You know, you shouldn't be talking about roads without talking about what's immediately adjacent to it. Nor should we be talking about the lands without talking about the roadways. The thing that's mind-blowing to me about that Seminole Pratt Whitney, it's a 4-lane roadway with bike lanes and asphalt bike paths next to the bike lanes connected to dirt roads. I mean, it's a really expensive, there's even curbs out there. And there's a sewer pipe, that manhole covers that are like this big. I mean, they're huge. And it's an incredible investment. And ultimately that stuff's not going to produce a lot of revenue. It's going to facilitate trips, but that's it.
So there's been a few people who have alluded to the pressure to increase development capacities on sites. And as we have the discussions about the Broadway corridor, South Dixie corridor, I think, you know, one question I'm wondering about is just, you know, one could take this data and say, well, we just need to stack them and pack them. You know, we just need to zone the whole corridor as high as possible, build 50-story towers all along the corridor. Obviously, that's the economic feasibility of that could be very questioned. But I guess my question is, what is the opportunity cost involved with doing that, with overzoning or giving away additional development capacity in the downtown and the Broadway corridor, et cetera?
Well, you give it away, it's gone. I mean, you have Bert Harris back here. So, you know, messing around with your zoning code is serious business. Once you give it away, you can't get it back, or unless you pay them for it. So, you know, any talk about let's just start raising heights and everything, you've got enough land existent in the marketplace. There's just no incentive for anybody to put it into the marketplace. So the developers that actually couldn't actually successfully negotiate, generally the way they make their deal work is they got to go get some zoning gift to make the deal work. You know, that's the basics to it, or to be overly crude. But you know, you can't stack them and pack them. You can't build more two-city plazas. It's a lot of capacity to absorb. And you actually have the data that you can look at to see how they were absorbed, what happened in the marketplace. Look backwards. It's only 10 years to look at, maybe 15. You know, talk to the developers. How did they absorb? What was your absorption rate? How did it work? And that was during a boom. You know, you could average that out through the bust. and do the math on it. But you know, I do see in a lot of communities are like, well, let's take the lid off this puppy. Let's just keep going. And it's like, well, really, the lesson is in the townhouses. Those are easy to do. You don't have to deal with fire code issues at the level that you have to do with a high rise. They're cheaper to do. More people can do them. That was also the lesson of the downtown master plan. You know, like all these smaller buildings, they're still big, but they're a lot smaller than the Darth Vader building.
Using South Dixie as an example, where you've got 150-foot depths or whatever, thank you. There's, I don't know what the number is, but there's a tipping point where a building on South Dixie is too big for the site and can actually have a negative impact on the neighborhood values that are immediately adjacent to it. So the context is very important. The CBD is different, of course, but when we get on the corridors, that context is really critical.
And it's not like it's talking about townhouses is going to be a cakewalk in this town. I'm sure people talk about the skies falling and children will get maimed by townhouses. I mean, that's, I'm sure those projects, well, the Magnolia Park one was fairly easy. I think Antique Row is a little bit more controversial or contentious.
Well, and I think the other concern with height is where we started in the early 90s, which was that we got a Darth Vader and we got a Trump Towers. And then we had to wait a 20-year real estate cycle for anything to be ready to come in. And part of the original revitalization strategy was to take everything down so that we would fill up a couple of spaces instead of just one at a time and start creating that sense of place. So it's a balance between up and out. And I think that's what's hard. And exactly, and the changes I think have been made thoughtfully. Whether they've all been right or not, we can argue about. But, you know, you have to be careful. You can't just...
I would be curious to find out, one of the minor failures of the master plan, the Dwani plan, was that we all assumed that we were going to develop, 150-foot wide lots or 100-foot lots or 75-foot lots. And we know what happened, right? Developers came and they bought a half a block or a full block. Is there an economic number there that we can show people why that's not a good idea? I mean, to show them that the small infill projects, the Bill Bones of the world versus the large mixed-use full block projects?
You're about, Bill Bones about 5.5 million an acre.
5.5?
Yeah.
And then the large one across the street, the 8-story
City Palms.
City Palms was
City Palms 34.
Joe Verdone, Carlton Fields. How did the incentive program actually have the impact on the economic model here? It seems like that incentive program, where it was 3 additional stories, had a huge impact on downtown development, and perhaps it's a key to how to make this work by setting up performance standards and seeking people to come into a market early and seed the market.
Well,
the critical mass.
Actually, that's a great point, Joe. And back to the master plan comment earlier, the incentive program gave the tools to the development community as an as of right. It was fairly predictable, but it also gave them the ability to go out and negotiate for real estate, knowing that they had leverage to get an extra 3 stories. On top of that was the TDR program, to go out and buy extra stories and transfer that within the zone. So it was a win-win-win situation. We didn't lose the capacity in the downtown. We preserved historic buildings, and developers got to use those extra unit spaces. I think all of those programs are really successful. So your building's 5 million. You're almost as potent as the Darth Vader.
Joe, there's an interesting thing that's happening right now, and I actually just got an email from Rick Green. It's coming up Monday, I think, for consideration before the City Commission, but there is a new incentive program that's being considered for hotels and office buildings along the Quadrille District. Now, full disclosure, I'm working on a hotel right now, but there are also 6 other hotels and down, either in stage of construction or in planning or whatever. It doesn't seem to me that the city has to undertake another incentive program to cause people to build other hotels or office buildings in that corridor. I mean, land values being what the land values are, people are going to come along and find a way to make it happen. If there's a market for an office building, forget about the hotels for the minute, but if there's a market for an office building, there's property along there, and somebody's going to find a way to make it happen. I mean, we are witnessing what happened with the incentive program in downtown with some of our huge, residential condominiums, full block condominiums, lot line to lot line buildings, which have really no architectural sex appeal whatsoever. And I just caution the city against doing another incentive program for this. And it's strictly driven, I believe, as a result of All Aboard Florida and an effort to try to get building in that area, which is going to happen naturally anyway.
Well,
So,
yeah, I think it's a little bit of that. I think a little bit of that is a little bit of self-consciousness, that we can only do something if we have an incentive program. I don't know if you necessarily need to do it, but again, that's a conversation for you all to have.
No, I know
if
that.
you
I sort of wanted to bring it up because we were talking about the residential incentive program, which resulted in.
That was of its time and place.
You know, the performance standards to increase the residential density of downtown,
We-
which had the effect of lowering trips coming into downtown.
And it was also, there's a lot of factors that made that successful. It was, it timed very well with this unbelievably crazy real estate market.
Yeah.
It was kind of like almost a crazy hitting the right wave.
Well, there was also pressure to restrike the balance in the land uses for the requirements of the TCEA. Keep in mind, when the residential incentive program was put in place, when the Joes crafted it with Anthea, that was 4,000 units ago. I mean, there weren't that many people living in downtown, at least not year round. It was more seasonal, but yeah. But there was a mandate though to balance the land uses for residential for the TCEA. And I would agree with you 100%. You incent things that you absolutely need, and you're not going to get otherwise. You're going to get Class A office space, whether it's 12 stories or 30 stories. You're going to get, actually the 30 stories you might not get because we don't know if there's a market for that. But the city's arrived,
My name's Susie Dwinell. I actually, I don't have any skin in the game other than I'm a resident actually at the new villas at Antique Row. I'm actually interested in wondering what's going on between the Dixie Belvedere interchange. I'm definitely concerned about South Dixie, but I also look at that sprawl of land that goes from Olive west over to where they're building the new Publix. I see that area, that intersection as an opportunity if done the right way, and I'm not in this conversation in the same way you are, but I am definitely an interested resident.
I mean, I followed the plans very kind of vaguely. I haven't really read them, but my understanding is they're rebuilding. You're talking about the Winn-Dixie Plaza? Yeah, they're.
But that whole area is the opportunity that could be handled, I think.
That they're building the Publix.
Yes.
Yeah, redeveloping the Publix. And unfortunately, they're not doing it in the manner that you showed in Chattanooga. They're kind of building it behind a sea of parking.
Yeah.
Is my understanding of the plan, which I think is a bit of a bit unfortunate, but.
Yeah.
There's a big landscaping element to it. I represent the developer in West Palm Beach, and there's a big landscaping element to that. So it's going to look a lot nicer than you might think it's going to look.
Okay, yeah. Joe, I was gonna ask a question about when we were looking at the property tax yields per acre for the western communities. I think they were in the $100,000 range. Was that right?
That's the value per acre. Yeah.
The value per acre for like Riverwalk and Ibis.
Riverwalk's 380,000.
Okay. Yeah. So my question is, when you consider the impact fees, which my understanding of impact fees are they're intended for kind of one-time capital contributions, right, for infrastructure. Now, seeing as how these are orders of magnitude lower than urban development, what's going to happen after the first life cycle of the infrastructure for these communities?
It's a good question. I mean, I don't. I'd assume that comes out of the county has to pick up the cost of those improvements. So you all are collectively paying for that second life cycle. In fairness to both of these projects here, it was a real challenge to present this to your commission because your mayor and one of your commissioners lives here. And, you know, it's hard to get your mind around the taxes, particularly because they're paying significant taxes individually out there. But there's all this other stuff that comes along with their community. You know, the trees don't pay taxes. The water doesn't either. But that's all part of the aesthetic of their community. So, you know, these are things that it's a trade-off. But you know, they did figure that out, and they kind of got it. You know, it's just hard putting on these new sunglasses and seeing things this way. You know, and you want all this stuff, great, but there's a community cost that goes with it. You know, I want to be 6 foot tall and have a full head of hair. It'd be awesome. I think y'all should pay for it. You know, it's like there's a cost to that stuff. You know, when people come to a commission meeting, they're like, I want blah blah blah. It's like, all right, well, what's the bill? You know, those are the ways. That's just a different way of thinking. And it's not to say that everything's got to make money. It's just understand that there's a trade-off and there's a cost to the broader community that we all have to think about.
Joe, I have a question back to downtown on micro units and parking. Have you done other places that have incentivized micro units? As Bill was mentioning, our code requires a minimum average of 850 square feet for an apartment. That's the average. And the smallest size is 550, which is a pretty big apartment. So,
is that the building code, or is that?
That's our building code, yes.
The DMP.
Is that the new master plan?
Huh?
The master.
No,
It's a
that's
master plan.
Really? Got 3 variances, yeah.
It's established minimum unit sizes.
Yes,
Established minimum and a minimum average.
and a minimum average. So,
We didn't have that before.
like for example, at
Get rid of
Clematis.
it.
Get rid of that.
Get rid of it.
Well, right. So how?
Get rid of it.
400 feet.
Just get rid of it.
And the micro units, you know, the 400 square foot and thereabouts. Have you seen those in some of these places you've studied already, or?
But yeah, I mean, we've got 400 square foot units in Asheville.
Yeah.
Get rid of the square footage minimum. That's stupid.
Yeah.
But why?
I live in 300 square feet. I live in a 1,200 square foot 1921 bungalow with a wife and 2 daughters.
That's right, you
Wait,
did.
you don't have that
They're nice iffy.
So when you're buying a unit, typically you're buying a unit plus a parking space.
Not in a assigned space, I'm talking about a shared use parking, so parking is used at night, when each is going at night.
We did this project in Asheville. This is a city parking garage. This was our land. We were working with this hotel developer, and we're doing housing, and we had to figure out a building that we're going to be building in the future so that we could load the columns and we could pay the city the extra column width that we had to pay them. The city was going to give us nothing for this project. So the city did their project. This is the legal agreement, is a 3-dimensional model. Here's the city's project. Here's our building stepping over theirs. Here's the hotel. Here's the air rights. And we wanted 0 parking spaces, none, because we didn't want to put that into the cost of the unit. So we said, look, we're gonna sell the units. If somebody chooses to have a car, they'll come rent the space from you.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. And so they got a pass. The city actually tried to make us buy the spaces, and we're like, no, because we'll put a big reserve sign over it, and no one will use it. So how about they buy?
Exactly the concept I'm-
Yeah, we'll buy a pass. They'll buy a pass if they want it, and when they leave to go out hiking or whatever, you can sell that space again.
So what was the economic advantage to the city as a result of you guys coming in and building those units around those parking spaces?
Well,
compared to that investment for
what the
parking?
city got is the city had in their master plan, they have identified this spot, which happened to be our land, to do a parking garage anyway. Had they gone off and just built a city deck, it would have been 0 tax producing. This is the only part that's built right now. We're still working on this part and this part. Just this little piece right here is, when we had the site as a surface parking lot, it was producing $7,000 in total taxes. Just this building right here is producing $57,000 just to the city.
But would that be feasible without that garage there? I mean, even though there's no parking
Oh,
requirement,
they want-
would it be feasible without
They
the
wanted,
garage?
they wanted to buy the building, put their own parking in, and call it a day. So at least it untapped that parking that was going to be there anyway and made it public. You look at all, I mean, God knows how many parking spaces you have in all of these buildings. And
You know, it's interesting, our hotel project, which is at Ventura Street, is gonna be 150 rooms, you know, 8,000 square feet of commercial. And this, I have to give it to the city, they were exceptionally receptive to allowing us to get parking in the Vernon Street garage. We have no parking on site. We're immediately adjacent to the garage. And that's a garage that at 5:15 at night is empty. You know, so we have a shared parking. It's a great agreement. We pay rack rate, you know, for the parking, but it allows us, and we have 6 townhomes exactly like that planned for the front of our building. So, I mean, it's almost a replica of that.
So-
and I have, you know, kudos to the city for working with us on it.
But take that thinking, like, can you all drive into the county's parking deck yet at night? I mean, how many parking
Even
spaces?
the surface parking lot is closed.
But this is the thing. How many parking spaces do you currently have that are just basically not unused at night? So this is
Hundreds or more.
it's infrastructure. It's infrastructure. Get over the policy issues and figure out how to best utilize the infrastructure to drive everybody's expenses down.